Well, good afternoon on this 18th day of June 2017. I wanted to go to the next verse in Revelation chapter 11, but before I go there, I want to bring an update that I feel has been provided for our benefit. Considering that I've been talking about the 24 elders in Revelation 11:16, and showing how Doe talked about the 24 elders, and Soroti wrote in his document in the Heaven's Gate book about the 24 elders, and Doe referred to them as the ones that were with him when he was doing the Beyond Human series. Before the return of the students that had been in like a halfway condition or outside the classroom but were still in touch, came back. Although I'm not trying to say that the individuals that were all there were the 24 elders, I don't know that. It doesn't really make any difference who was who. That's all human egoism. But the fact that there were 4 and 20 elders, which were separate from the 4 living beings, is what is, and that is right here in Revelation 11, and talked about in Revelation chapter 4, that I talked about in the previous broadcast as being evidence of what T called the briefing, that she feels like she and Doe and returning souls received, the souls that had vehicles, received before they came by crashing spacecrafts in the New Mexico, mostly in New Mexico, but potentially also Arizona and maybe California and maybe Nevada, maybe Utah. I don't know exactly where all the crashes were. But Texas actually should be high on that list. But it seems like they did a crash in the primary areas of the Southwest that I said in a previous broadcast, I believe represent the altar. Because the altar in the Old Testament, in the Moses camp of the first trimester, was where the flesh sacrifices took place. And those were never human sacrifices, by the way. Those were always sacrifices of a lamb or a goat or a bull or I don't know if a goat was actually there, but a bull or or birds, and they also had non-flesh offerings. Of like a flour or bread kind of mixture that they would make. They were able to, and certain herbs that they burned as part of different festivals that were they were called festivals, but they weren't like today's festivals, I don't think, to where you have just a bunch of music and arts and crafts and theater or whatever, being demonstrated on stages for entertainment. And the next level, the festival was representing the movement of the planets and the moon in particular in certain locations, and was associated with certain overcoming developments, conquering of breaking instructions, which would be called a sin. The sin really actually meaning missing the mark, so that if you broke one of the instructions, then you had to give a sin offering. So that was actually teaching those toddler, what Tiendo called the toddler level humans in the first trimester, Tiendo talked about, of the birth process, being like a 3-trimester birth process. We're teaching them how to follow instructions. Because remember, the initial problem that was stimulated was manifest during the beginning of the experiment with the development of Adam, the creation of the Adam vehicle, and the soul that took that vehicle was Do, according to T. In order to set up the environment for the experiment, because also the Luciferian space aliens were also let out of their underground prison cells so that they could influence Adam and Eve. So it was a full choice of who to give our allegiance to. Now, in that context, in Genesis, the Elohim, which was a plural Hebrew term for judges or leaders or magistrates, which the next level older members certainly are, captains and admirals, captains of angels, captains of messengers, captains of crew members, which is what an archangel is. So that by having the sacrifices of something that was of great value to them and what they ate from those animals and whatever milk they got from those animals, if that's what they did, and was especially in the desert at that time where they had, I guess, a limited supply. I don't know, I guess it depended on how many births there were in their 40 years, because they brought animals with them initially. So I don't know too much about how many animals they had by well, but the festivals seemed to be started up pretty quickly after they made their first commitments to Moses when he came down from his visit with Jehovah on the mountain to receive the first set of instructions to follow. Don't kill other humans, and don't steal from other humans, and the rest of them. But those are all considered toddler lesson plan, and everything that came after that, even though those toddler lessons still apply now. Anyway, so they were setting up the criteria for sinning based on for breaking instructions. Basically, is actually the better way to say it, because sin has all this connotation of what the humans have distorted it into. And the original sin, and this sin, and that sin, and what sins were worse than others, and which, I mean, is true. There are breakage of procedures that are worse than others, because Do had a list that was called the major offenses, and then he had another list was called lesser offenses. And the major offenses, some of them were grounds for being instructed to leave the classroom, which did happen in one case, which which Mark and Sarah were part of, when they didn't want to follow the instruction that was called "I could be wrong," which had to do with recognizing that we could not trust our own minds. Just for your reference, it was like 1978, I believe, around that time, when T actually said to us all that we needed to give them our will. Now later, after T left, Doe confided in us and told us that that T felt like she would lose half the classroom by telling him that. But they didn't say that when they gave that instruction, that we needed to give them our will. Which, to those that were fully committed, which I have to say that I was, as much as I knew how to be fully committed, that didn't mean anything to me. That, that was just one more thing in the lesson plan. But I wasn't even thinking of it as a lesson plan at that time. I was just like going with the flow. I got attached to it. I was awakened to it, and I was still, I was still gung-ho. Not that I wasn't gung-ho for the rest of the years. I was, but of course, over time, I started to let certain things slip in my self-discipline. But even back then, I was letting things slip. But that was a slippage, and that was like a sin. When you let when T and Doe would come to us in a meeting and say that we could no longer permit thoughts of sensuality and sexuality in our heads, which Jesus actually prepared us for at first, by saying that you could not even lust for somebody that while you were committed to somebody else. I guess there's nothing wrong with lusting for somebody when you weren't committed to somebody else. But if you were married, which was making a commitment to one person, and then you were lusting for somebody else in your mind, then you were actually committing adultery, according to Jesus, which wasn't the way adultery was defined under Moses. Under Moses, it was having sexual intercourse with somebody while you were committed to somebody else. And Doe said that adultery was actually not becoming an adult, which I never did really understand what he meant by that until I realized that becoming a full-fledged member of the next level was also considered to be an adult in the next level, where not having reached that high yet was considered to be an infant member of the next level, or a son, or a child of God, like the children of Israel, like the children of God that were in Genesis chapter 6 that fell, the Luciferian space alien fallen angels. So back to the subject of this broadcast video, the 4 and 20 elders. What I wanted to bring up regarding them well, let me segue to something else first before I go into that. I want to segue into this article that I received from my news feed. Let me bring it up so I can see it over here. So I'm looking at the video. It says, I'm going to just read a little bit of it. It's from a website. It's a newspaper or a media website called express.co.uk, which is kind of a like a I don't know, maybe some people would call it a rag newspaper, or like the Inquirer, but it's not I don't think nearly as sensationalism based as the Inquirer. But they do publish things about aliens and so on. So therefore, they're not going to be considered a mainstream paper. But I'm sure many Brits and Irish probably have more respect for it than they do probably for a lot of the other media. But the mainstream media in England and Ireland. But I may be wrong about that, and my friends in Ireland could. Actually, I only have one friend in Ireland. Maybe he sometimes watches these broadcasts. I mean, he can weigh in on the value of the Express newspaper. I don't know if they actually have a hardcover, a paper printing of it or not. But anyway, so the report was prepared on January 8th, 1989. That they're making the subject of this. It was, I think, a 4-page report that was considered to be a leak in January 8th of 1989. Which was about 10 years after, supposedly after the Dulce, New Mexico leaks. That talked about how that Dulce, New Mexico had a base that was some 10 or so more levels down, and that the bottom half of the levels were maintained by space aliens, and that the top levels were maintained by humans, and that they, in 1979, they had, if I remember correctly, they had a little battle among them, and a bunch of humans got killed, and maybe a space alien got killed. I don't remember exactly. But when we're talking about space aliens now, what I'm talking about are the Luciferian souls that had developed new human vehicles to occupy, and they can occupy more than one, because they're not the driving force in the vehicles that they occupy. Though I don't know that actually. That may be, maybe they do need to be there in order to have them have a certain amount of valuable function. Maybe they do need to be present with those vehicles for some period of time. But I believe they can leave those vehicles, which they could probably do during sleep or during meditation or maybe all the time, and just let the vehicle run on its programming just like human vehicles run on their programming, and don't necessarily have a soul. And that programming is what is called a spirit. So it's either misinformation programming or it's true information programming. And the reason it's called programming was because Tiendo used that term for it. But it's also because of, I believe, because we're the decider. We're not the programming. We're the decider of what programming we're going to include in our database, in our mind, in our genetic database, in our electromagnetic spirit database, which is actually in the case of those that receive souls, which can be many, many, we don't know how many, is contained within the soul. But the soul is actually bigger than the human vehicle, according to Doe. So, so the way I picture that is that every cell of the body has a genetic structure. And every cell of the body and every molecule has a electromagnetic field associated with it, has polarity, has a positive and a negative charge. Each is a magnet to some degree, drawing fluids and repelling fluids, drawing what it wants to take in and rejecting what it doesn't want to take in as nutrition. And so the same thing, that same process of all those cells, therefore, has a mental parallel. That is emanating from the flesh vehicle, but is not, as I understand it, is not limited to operating only through the flesh vehicle, or because when the flesh vehicle is alive. I mean, it can operate when the flesh vehicle is sleeping, I believe, because Tiendo said that the next level gives us lessons in our sleep, what we call dreams. I mean, there might not be dreams, you might not actually have any remembrance of them. But they help us move ahead and prepare for our next day's lessons, and they know who's asking and who's not, in whatever way they're asking. It doesn't have to be in the way of, asking Tiendo by the name of Tiendo, unless they've heard about Tiendo. If they heard about Tiendo, then they're going to be showing what they're made of by continuing to talk to Tiendo in their privacy, just like the way Jesus said in your prayer, you need to talk to your Father who is in heaven, which Tiendo also taught that, especially initially, that we need to reach beyond the stars for the highest being we could reach with our questions and our petitioning for what's next. And as we became more committed students, then we knew that though that was never discontinued, we knew that what it needed to become with all our efforts was directing that asking to Tiendo, whether silently or through notes. I mean, since they were with us physically, we could write a note when we had a question. And that was the most realistic way, not realistic, the most accurate way of getting information from Tiendo. Right now, we don't have, the only accurate way we have for getting information from Tiendo now is by reading and listening to and watching the videos that they left behind. And everything that's in the books, in the Heaven's Gate book. How and when the physical kingdom level above human may be entered. And that's what we need to cling to for if we want to give ourselves to the next level at this point. But those that don't know about Tian-Do or haven't they have a little different criteria. And that criteria is based on what the next level determines it to be. Do didn't feel qualified to go through all the different ways, different kinds of people that would apply to, except in the general way that they were in one way or another separating from the world, meaning the not the actual physical gravity or geographic area of the planet, separating from that, and not, but separating from the human kingdom that was growing on that planet, on the planet, and by separating from the human kingdom, of course, all has many stages to it, many degrees of that separation. And that's what the Moses camp was starting to teach. So back to this report. The report stated that advanced beings of non-human nature are continuously being detected along with their flying disc craft in the controlled airspace of the U.S. since July 7th, 1947. Then another quote was, "The remain of 7 flying craft and the bodies of 27 non-human beings have been recovered as of this briefing date and are at present being studied by Majestic 12 scientists." The Majestic 12 scientists were 12 scientists. I think 6 of them came from a military background, and 6 of them from different parts of the service, the military service, and 6 of them came from a strictly medical or, I guess, background. I'm not exactly sure how to say it, but it was in this article, actually. I think they talked a little bit about that. So it's worth looking at for sure and studying. Then the next quote is, "3 of the recovered crafts are nearly intact, and one such machine has maintained some of its power since retrieval in 1948. Maybe that's the one that Bob Lazar said that he witnessed hovering in the hangar where they were kept in the Groom Lake area, where he was taken to, hired by Oppenheimer to backwards engineer one of their engines. And that he determined had a new element driving it that had an atomic weight that was more than anything that was on the periodic table before that. The next quote is, "Since 1957, no additional alien craft have been available for study." So the next level gave a 10-year period where they were providing spacecrafts for the humans to study and to know that there were beings that were from outside the human kingdom on the planet. So that's been known for a long time, and of course it's still tossed around now because most people, many people, I don't know if it's most or not at this point, but many people would have a hard time handling it. And so it can, you know, kind of short circuit them, and it's not fair to do that to them. So the next level Tiendo said also has a cover-up. They're covering up a number of things about their older members and things that they could prove to us easily. And they could prove to us all that Tiendo were the Father and Jesus from the evolutionary level above human. You know, but it would be, well, I don't know how it would be exactly, but maybe they can't prove to everybody, because maybe some people don't have the ability to, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Anyway, so the next quote was, the assessment is that these beings have adapted or perfected these machines, the crash spacecrafts, to the conditions of our world as to avoid any further such revealing crashes. So the humans are saying in this report that they think the reason there's no crashes after 1957 was because the aliens figured out how to not crash. Because they initially said that they thought the Roswell crash happened in the plains of San Augustine because of the response of the spacecraft to their radar systems, which you know, maybe the next level even gave them that idea. I don't know. It may even be true that the next level knew that these spacecrafts in particular, would be affected by the radar systems. It's amazing, actually, the way the next level does all this, and it's very hands-on. And these are some of the tasks that you would be involved in if you actually graduate into membership in the next level. So it's definitely worth it, worth whatever you have to go through, even though, of course, it's difficult. But the difficulty is regulated by the next level, so that we can all do it. Nobody on this earth, nobody that can understand this information is incapable of making it to their next strata of potential membership in the next level. It's always going to be potential membership in the next level until you're actually an adult in that next level, because it's never a given, like the Christians make it sound, which they got from Paul. It was the misinformation provided by Paul, which was provided by the Luciferian space aliens in order to detract from the reality that there was a lot of work involved, and they didn't want to have anything to do with the idea of working for heaven, working to get into heaven. It seemed like, I mean, that's the way the Luciferians twisted it, to make it look like, you know, they just wanted you there because you believed, which belief, yes, will get you in the door of being saved for a future opportunity, maybe depending on what you believe, because all belief certainly isn't going to get you there. The next level determines that. Because if you don't have the programming that you've accepted, at least the premise of, as being possible and true, even though you're going to have problems and you're going to have certain doubts about it, which is natural to the overcoming experience because of the presence of the Luciferian misinformation mind, then the next level doesn't seem is going to have a use for, or is not going to see you as a prospect. They know the criteria. They know it very well, and it's not something I can really second guess. So I shouldn't really say that the next level won't see certain people as a prospect just because of what they believe or don't believe. That's like, saying I have that overview, and I don't. So thank you, Tiendo and crew for correcting me in that regard. See, I see it as Tiendo correcting me, even though it may not actually be so that a member of the next level is right now listening to me and hearing what I have to say and then sending me a thought when that makes me uncomfortable or something with what I said, and so then I seek to correct it. I don't know if that's happening or if the next level mind that is in this soul that is recognizing that what I'm saying, what this vehicle is saying, doesn't jive with what that next level mind received from Tiendo during its 19 years of schooling. So, but that means the same thing anyway. It's still thank you Tiendo, because Tiendo are the ones that gave me that mind to house in my container soul in order to grow that soul into a member of the next level. And that's what, so it's not my mind really. If it's from Tiendo, it's not my mind. It's their mind. But I can't assume that everything that comes out of my mouth is their mind. It's a trial and error. And if I can't relate it to something they said or wrote, which includes my memory of what they said and wrote, then I don't know that it's from their minds. And it might even be likely not from their minds, because they gave us all the information we need. So even his interpretations of prophecy can be from their minds, because they were given by a next level member to John, in this case, whoever John was, and we can count on what's in the book of Revelation, I think, to a degree, according to how it jives with the things that Jesus said, because Tiendo said that we could count on what was said in the four Gospels that was attributed to what Jesus said. So you would see it in the red letter edition. But different software, puts it in different formats to show the difference between what Jesus said and what the disciples wrote about what Jesus said. So, and did. What Jesus said and did. So, and here's where it talks about the Majestic 12. The document said 6 senior military officials and 6 private sector scientists, all unnamed, made up the group. which was operating at sites across the country, including the NASA Ames Research Center in California. So that's where I got that military and private sector. Okay, scientists. They weren't medical scientists necessarily. Science is such a broad term nowadays, isn't it? Anyway, I'm not going to get off the track with that. So I haven't watched this show, but I should look for it, because the document is said to have been given to Heather Wade, host of U.S. late night online paranormal radio show Midnight in the Desert, from a known source who has not been named. Then it talks about Stanton Friedman and all that, but what I want to get to with this is the idea that, maybe I'll just read what I wrote about it. What's most interesting to me about this report is how 27 bodies were found. I have determined by prophecy that there were 28 members from the evolutionary level above human who came to Earth by crashing some of their primitive spacecrafts during that time period. And actually, I'm talking about members with physical bodies. That was my question, actually. I didn't know if all those members, on my last broadcast is when I had that question, whether all those members the 24 elders and the 4 living beings all deposited physical bodies. And isn't it interesting that not more than days, some days, or maybe a week or so, after I made that broadcast and had that question, that this article popped up? You know, but that is typical of the way the next level does things with us. When we ask a question, and then when we see the article, and we see the words that are used in it, it's like that's what cues us into being a potential answer from the next level. And by the way, I do feel like there's a crew that are sometimes assigned to monitoring what I say in these broadcasts, so that I can catch myself, or they can help catch me when I say things that are off, that are inaccurate or misleading, or acting as if I know more than I do know. So that's whenever I get a signal, that signal could be coming from them. They might, who knows what they do? They might push a button and it sends a signal to this brain that causes me to hesitate and think about what I just said, and maybe that even comes with the truth that I don't know it. That might be, maybe they push the I don't know that button. You don't know that, Sawyer, which of course they could apply to anybody that they wanted to. So ask for that help. Ask for Tiendo. I say, ask for Tiendo to help you. And especially when you're talking to somebody, ask Tiendo to come through you to deliver what they want. You're not going to feel like this amazing, well, I don't think you're going to feel this amazing force come over you that's going to take over your body, and then all your words are going to be like a channeler, in a different voice and all that rigmarole that Tiendo would call tricks. I'm not saying that those things don't happen, and those aren't real spirits or Luciferian space alien souls actually coming through that vehicle. I'm not saying that any of that is not possible. I believe while in the classroom we had the, what was her name? Jane something, who was the channel for some entity that I think had a name that started with a Z. I don't know, I'm not remembering it. But anyway, back to the, so if you add the 24 members to the 4 living beings, you come up with 28. But they said that 27 bodies were found. But if you go to the idea that in 1897 there was a crash in Aurora, Texas, and by the way, Aurora means dawn, or morning dawn. It's the beginning of the day. And Jesus said in the Revelation that he was the bright morning star. The bright morning star. Interesting that Texas is the star. That's their one star on their flag. I just realized that. And it's called the Lone Star State, the single star state. So that might have been Doe that came at that point. But that wouldn't jive with this idea that it was the 20. And also wouldn't jive with Doe saying that they came and picked their vehicles during the 20s and 30s, 1920s and 1930s. So I'm going to stick with, but when he says he's coming, he's like he said to Jesus, like Jesus said when he was asked about the return, the impending return that he had talked about before. He said, you will see the kingdom of God coming. You will see the Son of Man coming. But he talked about it as you would see the kingdom of God coming in the clouds. I'm not sure that's an exact quote, but he did say in Luke, I believe, that the kingdom of God was coming. So he was talking about a whole crew coming, because the kingdom it's a many-membered kingdom, according to T and Doe. And of course we know that it's a many-membered kingdom because we know there were archangels, and there were angels, and there were fallen angels, and there were some that had assignments to be watchers, observers, and some had assignments to be messengers, angels, and some were captains of angels or archangels. So that's a structure. It's many-membered. So there's also, Doe considered himself to be a captain. And he considered T to be like an admiral, and also referred to T as the chief, and said that there was a chief of chiefs. So individuals that are glued to all the misinformation that's come regarding that through the religions, even though the religions serve their purposes, that they couldn't even help but become what they became, because when the next level left each time, the Luciferian space aliens were allowed to wreak havoc with their influence on humans. To distort the truth, and that provided the free will, and that the next level, when they came back, would present the truth again, and all those that had heard the truth the last time would recognize it to degrees, according to each of their growth, and they would either gravitate towards it more, or they would repel from it. and drop out. And then when they were given second chances and third chances, and how many chances they were given, because the Luciferians, according to Tiendo, were given multiple chances, many chances, with their words that he used, I think, many chances. But that they subtly began to drift more and more away from next level thinking and ability to comprehend next level ideas and next level behaviors and ways. And that became religion as they put their influence on humans. And those humans accepted it or rejected it, in degrees, of course. Because the next level provides for all their children, or potential children, so that they have a fair chance against the Luciferians, because otherwise we wouldn't stand a chance. We wouldn't stand a chance in hell. And actually Earth is actually the land of the dead, and many of those dead will end up choosing to be in hell, because the choices would have led them to no longer have any significant next level mind in their soul bodies, soul containers. Tiendo didn't call them bodies, so I shouldn't really call them bodies anymore. That's a mistake I've been making. Soul containers, soul deposits, soul pillowcases. So in the Aurora crash, there was one spacecraft, and it was actually considered to be like broken up into pieces. And some of the pieces fell down a well. It was right in the middle of town. It actually like hit right next to the clock tower. So it didn't destroy, I don't know if it destroyed any buildings. It might have started a fire, I think. But there was a one body that came from it, and the reports were that that body didn't look like human. Didn't look human. Remember, they already had in 1897 ideas about space alien because of all the science fiction things that had been developing since the early to mid 1800s. And actually before that crash in Aurora, there were sightings of cigar-shaped UFOs all over the United States. And from coast to coast, I believe was the report indicated. And they actually, not too long ago, they tried to exhume that body because they put it in a grave in the local cemetery, and they made an unmarked grave, and I don't remember what it said on the tombstone, because when they started to get attention to it again, they decided somebody actually robbed the gravestone, I believe, and actually, I think even robbed the grave, so took whatever was buried there. Wendell Stevens had something to do with that, and he wrote a very interesting book that I think is called The Alien Agenda, which I don't know that we had that in the classroom. But I didn't always pay attention to all the books that we had because of some of the tasks that I had that were all-encompassing of my time. And so when I first started to look at this, I thought, actually, it's when I'll actually go to where I was first looking at this. Because it was over here in Revelation chapter 8, which is very odd, but I think I understand it now, but I'm not going to talk about it. But it talks about how, when he had opened the seventh seal, there was a silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. Well, like I said, I'm not going to talk about the seals here, because the next verse talks about how I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Because the trumpets can be shown to have been blown starting in the early 1900s. And I tried to present that outline possibility in my book, which got me very involved in history, to try and dating everything, and trying to look for the patterns in the dating. But the next level does have patterns, but they also don't give us patterns that are easy to see, or that don't have exceptions, which is good, because otherwise we get too much confidence. We can get too much confidence in thinking we've seen the pattern. And we've seen how many Christians have tried to evaluate the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel and several books of Daniel and other Old Testament prophets and teachings of Jesus, to come up with date lines, and timing for everything, and some had some accuracy, I think, and some didn't. So anyway, the next verse says that, Revelation 8:2, and I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. So here we are with the 7. So the 7 angels might actually very well be 7 crews, because the next level do things in crews. They don't do things necessarily as single individuals. They could get an assignment to do something by themselves, but from everything I've got from Tiendo, that's the exception more than that's potentially an exception more than a rule. But if this case is right, where the Aurora crash was one individual, he came by himself, separate from everybody else, so he was given a task to do by himself. And I'm saying he but he was potentially a genderless vehicle, and the soul has no gender, so I'm just using he as a easy way to say it, but it has nothing to do with gender. Gender needs to be overcome, just like everything else, in order to graduate to our next classroom and towards the next level graduate adult membership. And then Revelation 8:3. Well, see, it says, and I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. Well, when did they stand before God? Well, we talked about that in Revelation chapter 4, right? That they were standing before God. And those were actually, I would guess that those were also some of the 24 elders, or the 4 living beings. The task name was angel, because angel actually means messenger or crew member. So Revelation 8:3, and another angel came and stood at the altar. At the altar. Now, the altar was the southwest, I believe. And that's not really from my mind that I'm saying that, because Tiendo said that's where they came and went from. And the southwest would include California, Southern California, near San Diego, Escondido, and Rancho Santa Fe. But that extended to Texas, was also the southwest. And that's where we circulated the most. Through there and north of there in Colorado and California. Never Northern California, though. But Colorado and Wyoming, because it's like there's a cross formed in the 2 streets. Thinking about that in a new way. Anyway, so Revelation 8:3, and another angel came and stood, meaning they took a human vehicle, at the altar. So they're standing on the altar, and they have a golden censer. Well, the only time that a golden censer was used in the Moses camp, where the censer is a bowl that contain the embers from the flesh sacrifice. So this is relating to, and a Day of Atonement was when they used, which was once a year, is when they used a golden censer, a censer that was made out of gold, as opposed to maybe it was made out of brass or something else when it wasn't made out of gold. And and so this angel has a golden censer. So that means to me that, well, also Aaron was the one that was the administrator of the golden censer, because he was the only one on the Day of Atonement that was allowed to give the ceremony of the of that festival date of the Day of Atonement, and so he was basically representing the whole group, because he was considered the chief priest in the classroom, the Moses classroom, and so he was like, by giving the sacrifice, he was atoning for the sins of the camp. Well, isn't that interesting? Because I had been thinking, I had thoughts that this was the same person as John the Baptist, who gave his life, sacrificed his flesh by not showing allegiance to King Herod. I think it was King Herod. And so his head was cut off because he didn't show allegiance to King Herod's commands. And So that was him laying down his life, because he knew that was what was going to take place. And John the Baptist was an assigned task, remember? That a member of the next level angel gave to Elizabeth. And Elizabeth does have some resemblance in relationship to Aaron, I think. But I'm not real clear on that. So I'll have to go back and find that in order to put that piece of the puzzle in there. I think I did talk about it all in my book. And there was given unto him much incense, which he says that he should offer it with the prayers of all saints upon a golden altar which was before the throne. So the prayers of the saints, in other words, that's the saints wanting service in the next level. That's the only prayer that's really, and the strength to have that service, to perform that service for the next level. That's the only, that's the biggest prayer that the saints can have. Thy will be done on earth. I will drink your cup of blood, just like you did, which I know will cause me to lose my vehicle's life, my physical body's life. And that's atoning for the sins of the greater community. You know, that, but it's doing so according to their older member. They're standing, they're taking a stand for their older member. So that's why, but then it says in the next verse, Revelation 8:4, and the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended up in view of God. That's what before actually means, because it has to do with the word en alpion. In the presence of, or before, of occupied place, in that place which is before, or over against, opposite, anyone, and towards which another turns his eyes. Ascended up before God, and God is Theos, I believe in this context. Yes, Theos. Out of the angel's hand. So, in other words, not the angel is passing the prayers of the saints, the petition, onto, is interceding, and that's what the job of the priest was in the Moses camp, and that the Christians end up, the Luciferians caused the Christians to actually make into a hierarchy, to where now humans are looked up to as being intercessors to God. That you think that, if you talk to a priest, then you can receive absolution from your sins. Or if you listen to and take the advice of the priest, that you are like taking the advice that's equivalent to receiving it from God. And now when you go into that building where they are, that you're going into the house of God, but it's not the house of God unless there's individuals in it that are genuinely trying their best to abide by behaviors and ways of the members of the next level according to how they understand it at the time, according to their station in their human school. So then what happens next is Revelation 8:5, and the angel took the censer, that bowl, and filled it with fire of the altar. Okay, that's where the ash coming from the sacrifice, and cast it into the earth. Cast it into the earth. Now that word cast comes from the Greek word ballo, B-A-L-L-O, and it means to throw or let go of a thing without caring where it falls. This is just all the ways it's used. This isn't the best definition necessarily. To get the best definition, I should really go to Revelation 8:5. Bear with me a second here. Let me switch screens. Oh wow. And I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne. Oh, I went to the wrong place. Revelation 5. I want to go to 8. So cast here, and the angel took the censer and filled it with fire. Altar. Fire from the altar, or of the altar. Fire, altar. Altar, fire. Now, a lot of times the words are reversed because in Hebrew the language is reversed from the way we read it in English. So many of the, some of the subject and the verbs, I guess, are reversed. Maybe that's not exactly true, but it's something like that. I didn't spend that much time on the actual language structure. But it makes sense to me more to say it as, and filled it with altar fire. Because I know from the Old Testament that the contents of the censer, the bowl, came from the altar fire. The fire sacrifice of an animal. Now, for anybody that has a problem with the idea of an animal being used as a sacrifice, well, you need to get over it and come in this direction, because all of the vehicles on the planet are plants. Called humans plants. And it doesn't mean they're not of value. And it doesn't mean that you disrespect them. And it doesn't mean that they're right and wrong. But everything on the planet was given to the human kingdom for opportunity to be in the next level school. And the animals were given to humans to dominate. The animals were given to dominate the animals. No, the humans were given the animals to dominate them. not dominate them, but the domination was for work. It was so that those animals could be of service to their next evolutionary strata. And that's why, like, for instance, Tiendo talked about domesticated dogs, are a good example of the difference between the next level and the human kingdom. Or the next, where the dogs are like the human kingdom and the next level is like the humans, who are the masters of the dog. And how some of the dogs gravitate to service and just aim to please no matter what, and how they please the master more, and the master then gives them treats, teaches them lessons. They can actually do tasks. Fetch the paper. Know who to bark at and who not to bark at. Being a seeing eye dog, all kinds of things that dogs then would never ever have the opportunity to do and learn and relate to the humans in that way, had those humans not taken them into their quarters, even against their will to some degree, taken them into their quarters, to try to domesticate them whenever that started. Like being taken into zoos or being taken into and sold as a pet to a human. So the animal loses nothing by dying, and even potentially gains something. That animal spirit that is in service to the human, and actually, like for instance with a dog, may seem to think of itself as a member of the family, equal to the children in that family. Maybe sits at the table with them and really feels like one of them. And if you gave them the opportunity to escape, run out the door and go, never come back again, they wouldn't take it. Or if they might do it, but they might come back pretty quickly when they realize that the benefits of staying where they were. So their instincts for being wild disappear. And that's the same thing that was happening in the human kingdom, starting with, in earnest, with the Moses encampment. Lesson plan, first trimester. And so caste is actually from the Greek word balo, to throw. See, that's a better definition. I can look to all the usages of it here, but to throw in various applications more or less violent or intense. So a violent throwing, which also causes a rising at the same time, or casting out, or the same word is used in relationship to dung, like being cast out of the next level, like a fallen angel, then you're going towards becoming dung if you don't take advantage of the opportunities to change from that fallen condition. Lay, as if lie down or lay down, or pour, put up, send. So they were sent to the earth. So we're talking about the earth here as a place, or that could include the human kingdom. It's actually from the Greek Gaia, a contracted from the primary word soil, but including the occupants in each application. So, so now this happens before the other times where something is cast to the earth. Which another way of putting it was in Revelation 9:1, and the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven to the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. So we know this isn't a fallen angel. This isn't, but they're calling it a star. So now they're talking about it as if it's a spacecraft, potentially. So that could be like a number of members that are in this spacecraft. And it doesn't necessarily mean a star. I saw a star. And the plural isn't apparent in the Greek all the time. And I can't talk educated about that right now. But so we don't know whether this could have meant plural. It can be determined, I think, in most cases. But anyway, so star fall from heaven to the earth. And to him, which can also mean them, given, or the one that was the leader of that spacecraft, the crew member, was given the key to the bottomless pit. Well, a next level, a Luciferian space alien fallen angel is not going to be given a key to the place where they're imprisoned. So that's how we can just use a little logic to arrive at this being one or more members of the next level in a spacecraft, because the next level is not going to come with just their body, just their physical body floating down. For one, they don't want to appear illusionary like that, because the Luciferian space aliens can make holograms that could look like a human body floating down from the sky, and they may actually do that still in order to trick a whole bunch of humans to thinking that's the return of Jesus. That's possible. That's talked about in Revelation chapter 13. So, which I will get to that. So, let's see. Cast it to the earth, and now that end can mean also, but it frequently means something that's going to happen after that, and the next level's time frame is usually at the least, years, okay, and can be many years. So, so that there were voices and thunderings and lightning and an earthquake that took place after 1897, which I went through what I thought each of those were, and I thought maybe the Tunguska meteor crash was one of those thunderings. And the earthquake in San Francisco, I think, was one of those, the earthquake part of it, the shaking, because that's what earthquake means, it means shaking. And I forget what I said the lightnings were, but so it was after all that the seven angels come sounding the trumpets, preparing them to sound. And the first angel comes. And so I'm not going to go into that anymore because there's so much to say on each one, and I actually want to get back to the Free Bible. Oh, I see. I changed that. So, where am I now? Okay. Chapter 11, back to here. Because I wanted to talk about the judgment. What am I doing? Oh, I was talking about the 24 elders. Maybe I went through that enough. Yeah, with those 27 and 1. There was a little bit more I wanted to say about that. But I guess there must be an influence sitting on me because they're trying to drain my energy here. This takes a lot of mental energy for me. Maybe because I'm such a basket case when it comes to keeping track of all these different things and how to, because I'm kind of interpreting as I go, and it's just, like even people that are, when I'm talking to somebody in person, it's very common for them to start to yawn. When T and Do were talking in the classroom, it was very common in the beginning of the classroom, the first, at least until T left, for individuals to be fighting back tiredness. And our instruction was to fight it, get rid of it, treat it like an influence and get rid of it. And so that's what I'm trying to do right now. Because that yawning would go around to a number of members in the group, and T and Do would be watching this. And then some of the students learned to repress the yawn so that you couldn't see it on their face, unless you were really sensitive to their facial muscles. But and maybe not even see it at all. And I got pretty good at hiding, suppressing those yawns. And I've been suppressing them now to some degree. Maybe you can see it though. But if I could get better at it. Get better at it would mean that I maintained my energy, so that I didn't fall into a tired condition. But the part that I wanted to talk about with the 24 elders was twofold here. Oh, it's basically in Revelation chapter 4 I got to go back to. Verse 7 and 8, which is talking about the 24 elders. I'm just going to read it first. And the first beast was the first living being, because it's really not a beast in this context. It was a bad translation. The first living being, like a lion. Like a lion. And the second living being, like a calf. And the third living being had the face of a man. And the fourth living being, like a flying eagle. Wow, I think I just got a picture of that better. Anyway, the next verse, Revelation 4:8, and the four beasts had each of them 6 wings about him, and just about, because him wasn't in the manuscript, and full of eyes within, and they rest not day and night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which was and is to come. Okay, so So each of the 4 living beings has 6 wings. Now that's 6 times 4 is 24. So that tells me that these 4 living beings are potentially growing towards or are already archangels, captains of angels. And that the 6 wings are 6 of the 24 elders to form 4 different crews. And those 4 different crews are have their station around the earth in what was talked about as the 4 winds, or the 4 corners of the planet, the 4 winds. Yeah, I said that already. Which wind and spirit is the same word. And by the way, Tiendo said that some of the wind, like in the Midwest, they felt was coming from the many killed buffalo and animals, cattle in the Midwest, stampeding. They weren't saying that was the total reason for the wind, but they were saying that was potentially a part of it. Or they didn't say that it couldn't be entirely at times, but they whenever we get absolute, we probably got a problem in these kind of descriptions of things. I don't say we always have it. It's not absolutely certain that we always have a problem whenever we're absolute. See, the next level is built. One of the key words that they gave us, Tiendo gave us, was the word flexibility. We need to learn to be flexible. And that meant dealing with your partner. That meant adjusting to changes. Like I remember one time we were camping in the Wyoming area on a big, huge private ranch. I don't know how many acres it was. Maybe hundreds, maybe thousands, for all I know. I didn't have that information. I wasn't involved in that. Lagodi was. I actually suspect Lagodi was the same vehicle that was Aaron. And that was, but I don't know if it was the same one that was John the Baptist or one of these, but it was one of these living beings. I think Jan Odie, Liv Odie, and June Odie were the other 3 of these living beings, and they may have been performing some of those archangel tasks as well. Or, but I think Do was Michael the Archangel, because of Revelation 12 talking about Michael going to war against Lucifer. And I know T said that Do's task, his adversary was Lucifer. See, that's why they just say a little bit, and you can, and then when you see it in the scripture and whatnot, then it's like some of those little things they said potentially provide you with a bigger picture. And that's the way T and No got information, by the way. Frequently they got an idea, and then when they would pull, but their terminology was, we would pull on that idea, and by asking questions, by trying to understand more of what the ramifications were, and the application in the classroom, because it was all for the classroom's sake that they were getting information. So they would get what they called, I believe, a chunk. Also, they called it that, and they knew that were given more than they understood. And they talked about that in the Black Hawk tapes. And they knew that when they gave it to us, pieces of it, that we were going to only get a small percentage of what they got. But sometimes the students' questions would bring out more of what they got, because they'd be then tuning into that more. And sometimes they would ask questions at the next level to try to get more clarification on things, and sometimes they would get clarification and other times they wouldn't. And when they didn't, they just assumed either their question was not the right question, they needed to think about it more or rephrase it, or it wasn't something they needed to know at that time, for whatever reason. Because they always said that they were only a step ahead of the classroom. So that they wouldn't get too far ahead to where they would end up potentially losing some in the class because they were moving too fast. And it doesn't seem like it that they were moving fast, but each of these, for anybody that's been listening to these broadcasts or studying anything about Tiendo's written and said, they know that they can only take a certain amount at a time to where they're digesting it. And if they went back to that same reading, they would see that they grew more and now they could understand more, and that there were new things popping out at them in what the things that Tiendo said and did. And that's because their minds are so much broader and bigger and denser or powerful, more energy filled, more everything, and how that translates to more flexible, more self-disciplined in their behaviors and ways in order to stay on track better, how they are kinder, thoughtful, detailed, observant, more observant of things, which are all things, that keywords that Tiendo were teaching us. I don't remember thoughtful being in there, but observing was definitely one of our lessons, to learn to see more, to see what's there more. And we had exercises for that, but I'm not going to go into that. But I talked about it in a previous broadcast if you want to look it up, one of these recent ones. When I say previous broadcast, I'm talking about ever since I started talking about the 7 seals. There was a big gap when I hadn't done any videos. Actually, the first video I started to do was about like an introduction to my book. So from that point on, that's what I'm talking about in the previous videos. Because before that, in comparison, I feel like I had next to nothing to say. But I was trying. I mean, that's not true exactly. Some of the first ones I did that had no talking in them and were just words on the screen with music that I got from the music that I played with bands and by myself. When I've gone back and looked at them, I kind of feel good about them still. And I think I did 4 or 6 of those. I don't remember how many exactly, but but this idea of, okay, so let's say those are 4 living beings, each like an archangel, and each have a crew, and each member of that crew may also have a spacecraft. So they may be flying, and they can maybe join together, so maybe they're like one big spacecraft and they can go between them, walk around in between. I just had that thought just now. sounds perfectly. And it's not like these things haven't been observed. There have been a number of observations by NASA and the space telescopes and JPL and European Space Agency probably has their own, of showing lights, like a big light, and then all of a sudden breaking up into a whole bunch of pieces, and then coming back together again, or two coming together, or two breaking apart into two, and then those two breaking up into two, and those two breaking up into another two, whatever. Anyway, all those combinations. I'm getting carried away, but and the comet West was seen to break up into two and then into two again. Each of those two parts broke into two again. So this idea that they could all be spacecrafts, these wings, I'm not sure what word that is. It's the Greek word, pteros. Pteros, P-T-E-R-U-Z-U-X. It just means a wing and it refers to birds. So there you go. It's referring to flying. And now they don't necessarily have wings like a bird, because it describes them Now, is it possible that they could have a vehicle that has wings like a bird? Well, yes, it's possible. Because when we were in San Antonio, camping still, I think, Tiendo felt like there was an aquifer under San Antonio, and they talked about like a triangular area. There were only two triangular areas I heard him talk about, and one was in the San Antonio area, and one was in the New Mexico area, around Magdalena and maybe Manzano, or maybe closer than that by Dadle and To the Consequences and Carrizozo, and San Antonio would be, who knows where. I mean, if you go by the places where we lived, then it would be Austin, Houston very briefly, San Antonio, and then but we also lived in Dallas, a little tiny bit in Fort Worth, and Dallas a lot, and Amarillo, which is interesting that those are three different places. And then San Antonio, Austin, and the hill country in Kerrville. Well, Kerrville was like a suburb of San Antonio, I believe, if I remember that correctly. Austin, we lived in the city center, so to speak. Actually, we were the suburbs north, and then we had a craft in the south. I'm going to make that the end of the broadcast.